Hey everyone, welcome, who's ever out there. So I'm Axel from Get Speaking English, and thanks so much for coming. Just gonna give it a minute or two, see who else shows up. I hope you all are doing really well. Feel free to, grab a coffee, something to write on, pen and a paper. We're going to be checking out um, the future today. So we're going to be talking about the future today and looking at some B2 first and C1 advanced style questions. Hello, welcome. And feel free to participate in the chat as we go along. I'm going to compile a bunch of notes for us, which will all be available afterwards when I share the video on YouTube. And I've been making the notes available in Discord as well. So we can put our heads together and think up of lots of fantastic examples. That'd be really great. So just a heads up, this lesson is aimed at preparing students for B2 First and the C1 Advanced Cambridge exams. However, a lot of this language, a lot of these words and phrases are going to be very, very, very helpful for your IELTS exam, for example, any general English exam, and also just for those of you who want to reach like an intermediate, upper intermediate to an advanced level of English. So it should be really great. And like I said, feel free to type in the chat at any time. I will be watching the chat, and your feedback and ideas are always welcome. So I will add them to the notes, and yeah, it'll be great. So just a really quick overview about what we are going to look at today. We are going to maybe check out some of the topics that might come up about this. So, sort of subtopics about the future, and we will brainstorm some vocabulary for talking about that. We're also going to do a quick tense review for talking about the future. So I know there's lots of very interesting tenses we use. So we'll review some of those. I'll give you some examples about how to use them. And then we're going to look at some of the different parts of the exam together. So today, like I said, we're focusing on part 3 and part 4. And we will be able to brainstorm some ideas, model answers together. And if there's time as well, I have a few idioms for talking about the future. And as always, I will share the video on YouTube, and I always have notes on the Discord. So you'll be able to check it out there as well. All right, so last time I did this, so we did pass part 1 and part 2, I think about 2 weeks ago. And we brainstormed some topics that came up. So, for example, thinking about the future, we might think of, technology, automation, artificial intelligence, obviously, space exploration. What are some other subtopics that might come up? So feel free to put your ideas in the chat. I would think maybe sustainability would be something that might come up about this topic. So sustainability, maybe education as well. Oops. Could be a big thing, right? Since education is changing and that'll be important. Potentially changes with, you know, jobs, the workforce, the job market, right? So maybe something about that. Again, feel free to put your ideas in the chat. Um, the economy, right? And finance as well, right? I mean, there's always big questions about how the economy will go, trends with that. Also, maybe demographics, right? Um, Also, population, overpopulation, right? Population growth. And obviously, you know, popul and obviously, demographics are changing, right? With migration and globalization, right? As we all move into cities and have to sort of live together in tight quarters. Um, yeah, so lots of other potentially other ideas as well, right? Also, maybe social justice, for example. There's a lot of movements right now about, inequality as well, right? So that's a big deal as well. All right. All right, fantastic. So let's brainstorm now really quickly. Maybe some things that you think will dramatically change in the future. So, and we could go sort of a good think positively and we can think negatively when it comes to the future. So let's brainstorm a few things that could potentially change for the worse. So if we talk about something that changes for the worse, it's like a negative. So it does not improve, but it becomes a lot worse. So maybe, let's see, things that might change for the worse. Potentially, there's climate change, right? I think that's a huge thing that most people are thinking about right now. Obviously, rising sea levels will create a lot of problems. Also, extreme weather events, right? Yeah, global warming, exactly. Huge problems, right? Um, could also maybe create problems with food and water shortages, right? So that's like a big, definitely a huge problem. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Also maybe sanitation. Yeah, definitely sanitation. Yeah, pollution, right? That's a big problem, right? Um, yeah, there's a lot of pollution right now, and how do we deal with that, right? Definitely. Yeah, great ideas. Maybe how about geopolitical instability? There's more tension, maybe more wars, maybe. Um, there's always the potential of like nuclear war as well, right? Um, that sort of thing, extremist groups, right? Um, Although to be honest, this kind of thing probably wouldn't necessarily come up in one of these exams unless it was part of one of the conversation at the end. But yeah, definitely something to think about, right? Maybe artificial intelligence as well, which could be either a positive or a negative, right? But I think a lot of people right now are really like worried about job security, right? Because it could result in job loss. Any other ideas out there that we could add to this list? Let's think too, maybe about some of the things things that might change for the better. Health, yeah. So health could like go either way as well, right? So health, maybe more like pandemics, for example, or different, diseases, definitely. But it could also improve, right? So health could potentially improve, could improve with new technologies, right? So that is definitely something. We'll probably see a lot of what we would say advances in healthcare, right? So new treatments for cures maybe for diseases. Also, telemedicine uh, or remote, like doing procedures remotely. Yeah, so those sort of things. Um, Maybe education as well, right? Everything's becoming a lot more accessible right now, right? Potentially, with the use of AI and things like that, education might become a lot more personalized, right? For sure. And maybe because it is more accessible, maybe it will lead to, um, greater equality when it comes to education, right? I think it's becoming more, more accessible, right? And more, it's becoming cheaper as well, maybe. Yeah, transportation, definitely. That could change as well, right? As we see new technologies coming up, maybe new modes of technology, which we've never heard of before. Like, who knows, right? I mean, we could potentially think too, like, maybe, you know, space travel could be a possibility at some point. And on that topic, also maybe just space exploration, right? Maybe we will colonize new planets, right? Which would be really exciting, or different planets. So that would be quite something. Or we might see also, human settlements on other planets. Yeah, so there's lots of sort of potential to see new and big different things going on. All right. So I thought it would be helpful. I thought it would be helpful to review some of our tenses. So last time we sort of looked at sort of the basic tenses that you might be most familiar with at an intermediate level. I thought we could push it a little bit. We're going to look at sort of all the tenses this time. I thought we could do a bit of a batching activity. So, and I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. Oh yeah, artificial lands. That would be interesting. So, yeah, maybe we'll be able to like create new, settlements um, on the water, right? Or something like that, on the oceans or on other planets. Yeah. Yeah, lots of interesting things that could potentially happen, right? Or the way that, cities might develop in the future. Yeah, so we're going to match the tense with the most appropriate description. So we have will, so the future simple, be going to, followed by verb. That's on here twice. You'll be able to use it in here twice. Present continuous. So for example, present continuous would be like be plus ing verbs such as like I am traveling or we are meeting. We have future continuous, so that's going to be will, be, ing verb. So for example, I will be traveling or I will be meeting. Future perfect. So will have plus the past participle. So for example, we will have finished or we will have eaten or I will have eaten. And then finally, the future perfect continuous. So will have been ing form. So for example, we will have been flying or I will have been studying. So let's think of these. Maybe let's look at maybe the first one. Let's kind of match them. So to talk about an ongoing activity which is then interrupted by another event. Any ideas as to what this would be? Well, let's look at them all together. We'll maybe match them. Feel free to put your answers in the chat. I have them on the next slide, and then we will look at some examples. So yeah, so option one is to talk about an ongoing activity which is then interrupted by another event. Number two, to talk about something which will be completed before another time in the future. Three, for a prediction based on current evidence. Number four, to talk about intentions, so something you want to do, which may or may not be confirmed yet. Five, to predict. So so you will be able to use this on two options here. So, because we can use that in a few different ways. So to talk about intentions, right? To predict the future events. So often far in the future. So to predict events. Also to say how long something has been happening at a point in the future, and to talk about already arranged plans, such as appointments, dates, and meetings with other people. Yeah, so let's give it a minute. See what we can do with what, and then we'll look at some examples. We can brainstorm maybe some examples together. I know there's only a couple of us here. So if you're ready for the answer, let me know in the chat. Or if you need a few more minutes, let me know. We'll move ahead. All right, no, that's okay. I know there's like a lot of options when we think about the future. All right, so we're gonna use future continuous to talk about an ongoing activity, which is then interrupted by another event. So usually you have a few things happening, and then one sort of is interrupted by something else. So for example, right? We could say, let's see, future continuous. For example, we'll be watching the game when you get here. So when you get here, when you arrive, we will be watching the game. we might say. Um, or for example, next this year, next time I will be, sorry, this year, or next year, sorry, next year at this time, I'll be living in Italy. Let's go with that. So, see those two kind of like, so this is sort of our ongoing activity, and then it's sort of interrupted by this other period in time, if that makes sense. So that's how we might typically use future continuous. Then future perfect. So we often use those. We will use those to talk about something that will be finished before another point in the time. So for example, by this time next year, I will have completed my maybe master's degree. So by this time next year, I will have graduated already. That will be done. Or maybe by the end of the month, we will have finished renovating our house. So we will have something finished before another point in time in the future. Right. And if you have another example, feel free to throw one in the chat. We can put together a couple good examples. I can give you guys some corrections. Future perfect. Oh yeah, wait, we just did future perfect. So be going to, as you can see, has two couple different uses, but we often use be going to. So be going to plus verb. We often use that to talk about intentions or to talk about predictions based on evidence. Alright, so when we're talking about intentions, we mean things we want to do, which may or may not be like confirmed. So for example, if I... Oh, I don't know what happened. Sorry. Alright. So we're talking about intentions, we're talking about things which may or may not be confirmed potentially. So for example, I think this weekend I'm going to go to the beach. We could say something like that. Or maybe I'm going to give my friend Paul a call after dinner tonight or something. So things we intend to do that may or may not be confirmed. So that's how we might use. We typically use be going to instead of will for that sort of thing, as long as it's sort of close to when we're talking. So that's how we would use be. That's how we would talk. That's how we would talk about what we want to do. And often it comes out sounding like I'm gonna da, 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 da. So every time you hear somebody say I'm gonna, that's what they're referring to. So I'm going to becomes I'm gonna. Yeah, so that's very common. And then we also use it to talk about predictions based on evidence. So for example, the sky looks really dark and stormy, so I think it's going to rain soon. So you better take your umbrella. Or maybe, the company's profits have been declining, so I think they are going to close soon, or maybe something like that. So, yeah, so we could definitely say that for sure. Exactly, yeah. So she is going to move to another town next month. For sure, exactly. Yeah. Or we could see the boxes, right? We could see the boxes everywhere. Or like, I think she's going to move soon. So, because we see that she's packing her bags. and she's getting ready. It looks like she's ready to move. So that is something that we could do. Yeah. And then we typically use will. Well, will, so the simple future, so will plus verb, future simple, we often use for making predictions. So for example, I think in, 50 years, we will live on another planet or something. Or for example, the population of the world will continue to increase over the next few decades, for example. There you go. Yeah. On another planet. Alright. Alright, so we got will, going to, and then we have some fancy tenses. The fancy ones on here. So the first one, the future perfect continuous. Future perfect continuous. So that's going to be ones like, will plus have, been, plus the ing of the verb. So I will have been traveling, for example. And we often use this to talk about how long something has happened before another point in the future. So for example, by this time, oh, sorry, wait. By the time we arrive at the beach, we will have been driving for 4 hours. So we're going to continue driving afterwards, right? Because it's an ongoing action, right? But we could use this tense to talk about how long something has happened before another point in the future. So yeah, so by the time we arrive at this house, we will have been driving for 4 hours. Yeah, that's a great future one. So in 2070, more countries will have nuclear power. Yeah, exactly, of their own. Yeah, definitely. There we go. Yeah, feel free to make more predictions. um, and another example of this one, maybe by the end of the year, I will have been studying Spanish for 6 months, maybe. So I'll continue studying after that point, but at the end of the year, I will have been studying Spanish for 6 months. So that's how long I was doing it for before that point. And then finally, present continuous. So we typically use present continuous. So present continuous, verbs like, for example, I'm meeting, or I'm going, maybe not going, but I'm traveling. So we could use this to talk about ongoing activities right now, but we can also use it to talk about things, our confirmed plans in the future. So confirmed plans in the future. And these are always like arrangements, appointments, dates, and usually with other people. So for example, I could say next month I'm getting married. So that's confirmed. We have the proposal, we have the church booked and everything, so it's happening. So next month I'm getting married. Or for example, maybe I've set up a sort of a lunch date with a friend. We could say, so I'm meeting my friend for lunch tomorrow afternoon. So another example of a confirmed plan. So anytime something is very confirmed, and again, like I said, has to be, it's going to be like an appointment or a date, something usually with other people, and it's set in stone. It's going to happen. We could use the present continuous to talk about it. So, yeah. So logically, we can't use this for things that we cannot plan in plan. Like for example, it might be weird to say, "Oh, I think I'm going to," or "I think I'm calling." Yeah, I'm going to go and I'm calling I don't know, the receptionist. Like we wouldn't say that. I'm going to call the receptionist because I need something from the hotel desk. So, yeah, but any sort of event, we would use that. Alrighty. So let's get into talking about some of these. Oh, so I have a quiz. I'm gonna leave it in the notes though. But feel free to go check out the notes after this video and do the little quiz using some of these verbs and see how you do. Alright, so let's talk about part 3. Let's talk about part 3 of this exam. So during this part, you're always going to get this sort of a spider web. One question in the middle and a couple different points. And so the B2 first and the C1 advanced, it's a conversation. They are sitting for, yeah, exactly. They are sitting for their final. They are sitting for their finals exactly on Friday. That would be definitely a confirmed plan. All right. So, so you always do it with a person, and part 3, part 4, those are like conversations, so you get to interact with your partner at this point. So during part 3, you both will get a piece of paper with a question and 5 points, and you have to talk about the question, taking into consideration the different points for about 2 minutes, right? And then afterwards, you will also be asked an additional follow-up question to discuss for another minute. So, there's just a few things to keep in mind, right, when it's happening. Try to be original. Don't repeat what your partner says. So you have to listen really carefully. Listen to what they say. You should respond to what they're saying. But when you make your own contribution, try to be original. Also, keep your contribution short. So some people talk a lot, but it's not a monologue. And you actually get points here for interacting with your conversation, or sorry, for interacting with your partner and being able to contribute to a productive conversation. So you have to give your partner time to speak as well. So try to be short, to the point, and ask your partner to either agree, disagree, ask for their opinion, and just focus on having a really, really, really good conversation. So we are going to be looking at this one here. I have it bigger on the next slide. But the examiner will typically say, for example, they'll give the paper and they'll be, here are some things that will impact people's lives in 2050, and a question for you to discuss. First, you have some time to look at the task, and then you'll have 15 seconds to look at the different points, and then they will say, now talk to each other about how these things may impact a person's life in 2050. And then you would have a discussion about this. So let's look at this in more detail. So we're talking about predictions here, right? So making predictions, obviously, we cannot know for certain what will happen in 2050. What's some language we could use for making predictions? Feel free to throw a few ideas in the chat. So for example, I think there might be, I think there might be a lot more artificial intelligence available to help us, something like that. maybe. Or maybe there probably will be, we could use probably to talk about probability. You know, there probably will be, I don't know, a lot more robots. I don't know. We could say, I guess. Like, I guess something might happen. Maybe, like, I guess. Or, I suppose. Those are great sort of phrases if when you're not quite sure, like, well, I guess. I suppose, maybe life will be, harder, easier, better, worse, maybe. We might also use like first conditional phrases. So when you talk about, if one thing happens, something else will happen. So first conditional phrases. So for example, if, and then it's always if, like a present tense with the if statement. And then will, a simple future in the second statement. So for example, well, if, sea levels rise, then people will need to migrate inland, right? So, yeah, so a common mistake that people do is putting will in the if statement as well. But anytime we have these like if statements or sort of like words of time. So for example, like as soon as, or until, or after. Like for example, after they arrive, we will get something to eat. So it's always going to be simple, simple present in the first part, and then the simple future in the second part. But yeah, so try not to make that mistake. All right. So let's maybe talk about, climate change then, since this came up a little bit earlier. What are some ideas about, so ideas about how climate change might impact a person's life in 2050? Any ideas? And feel free to put some in the chat. You guys think about it for a second. So I mean, climate change might, you know, there, there will probably be more extreme weather events. I don't know why this is small. Sorry. There you go. So there'll probably be more extreme weather events. Exactly. So like floods and drought. Exactly. Yeah, so floods and droughts, absolutely. Um, Also heat waves, right? The heat waves. Um, yeah, hurricanes as well, right? And all of which, might, well, I don't say might, will, damage buildings and threaten, the health and safety people, right? Like that'll be huge, right? Yeah, so there will probably be more extreme weather events like floods, droughts. Also, there might be heat waves and more hurricanes as well. So, and all of this will damage buildings and threaten the health and safety of people. Yeah, absolutely. So that was a great idea. Maybe also war. Potentially there could be also, there might be more, heat-related illnesses, right? Since global temperatures are likely to rise, right? So, and this could result in more hospitalizations, maybe? So that would be something. Any other ideas? I mean, another thing too, obviously, is that um, it's going to result in global warming, right? So global warming will result in rising sea levels, right? So a lot of places along the coastline will in be no longer inhabitable. Oh, sorry, they will be inhabitable. And we may also lose a lot of cities as a result too, right? So some cities we know today may no longer even exist in 2050, right? Yeah, so that's like a big thing. You guys think of any other ideas? Maybe crops? Maybe something with food, potentially? So, the rising climate change may also result in, lower, or maybe it will also impact crop yields and water availability, maybe leading to food and water shortages. Food could also become much more expensive as well, right? Potentially. I know this is a bummer. Um, I promise we will end this class on a positive note. Exactly. Food scarcity. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so climate change may also impact crop yields and water availability, leading to, yeah, food and water scarcity. Yeah. This could result in the rise of food prices. Exactly. Yeah. So good ideas. Exactly. Um, let's pick another one and talk about it. How about social media? How do you think social media might impact our lives in 2050? So, how might social media impact a person's life in 2050? A lot more toxic. Yeah, it's really toxic right now, right? I think it's just gonna get worse. so it so social media will most likely become a lot more toxic, unfortunately. hmm I'm sure it might continue to be, it will probably continue to be one, like the most, like one of, or the most popular ways of communicating in 2050. Yeah, maybe. That would be interesting, right? If we saw like some sort of huge revolt against, um, yeah, against social media. Yeah, maybe people, exactly, people will get fed up with social media, and more people will barely use it in the future. That would be something. Wouldn't that be kind of interesting? Yeah. I mean, right now, currently, social media gives, individuals the ability to influence others, right? So, so I'm sure this will only increase in the future. Maybe, I don't know. Any other thoughts about this? I mean, we've also seen social media being used to influence like elections and things like that. So, I don't know. So, but maybe even more people will try to use social media to influence public opinion or political decisions. I don't know. Also, more marketing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, it will probably continue to be used uh, as a key place for marketing products. Yeah, I'm sure advertising's not going anywhere. Exactly. Yeah, lots of different ideas. What are some ways, what are some ways, or how, what could we say to ask someone's opinion? So, for example, because we should ask other people's opinion during this part as well, right? Well, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that? So, I guess I just gave a few away. Like, what do you think about, or how do you feel about? And you could potentially use these keywords as well to sort of direct the conversation. So, for example, well, what do you think about artificial intelligence, for example? And then your partner would have to sort of talk about it. Yeah, privacy is going to be a concern, right? So, yeah. So, how do you feel about privacy? Do you think social media will become more dangerous in the future? Potentially, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, what's your opinion about this? Or what do you think about maybe, what do you think about yeah, maybe availability of resources? Or what do you think about what I just said? What about um, maybe some language? What could we say for agreeing? So, for example, um, exactly. I feel exactly the same way. Or, yeah, for sure, yeah. So, do you agree? Do you agree? Or do you perhaps have any other ideas? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so do you agree or do you perhaps have other ideas? Yeah, so that's great. Exactly. I feel exactly the same way. Da, da, da. Maybe that's a great point, right? Or great idea. We could also just say, I agree, right? And a little common error I see people say, some people will say I'm agree, but agree is actually like its own verb in English. So it's I agree, not I'm agree. Um, I don't know how to cross that out. So not, there you go. I had to change my note taking thing at the last minute because usually I use Google Docs for everything, but they made some development over the past couple days, and now it no longer works with this setup. So I'm trying something different today, but I don't know all the shortcuts. Anyways. So yeah, so I agree, not I'm agree, or we also don't say I am not agree. So we don't say that either. It's like I agree, I don't agree. Yeah, so we can maybe say that. Yeah, so I also feel, positive about this. Yeah, we could say that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or I agree, 100%. Or I only agree a bit. Maybe you don't, maybe you don't 100% agree. How about disagreeing? What do we say for disagreeing? Like I said, I don't agree. At all. We could say at all if we think whatever they said was absolutely like banana. It's like, I don't agree with you at all. That is completely wrong. Exactly. Yeah, so I'm totally, yes, yeah, I am totally against this. Or that, yeah, I'm totally against it. Yeah. Maybe like I can't agree with that. No matter how much I try, I cannot do it. Maybe something like that. Ooh, we could also say maybe like I don't think that's the case. As in I don't think that's what it is. So the case is like kind of like the reality. So yeah, so I don't think that's the case, as in I don't think what you're saying is true, basically. So I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's this instead. Um, we could also maybe say, I'm not sure that's quite right. So this is a rather polite way of telling somebody that that you think what they said was pretty wrong. So, um, yeah, so very polite. Alrighty. So let's talk about part four, and we'll kind of wrap up. Yeah, so part four is kind of a continuation about whatever you talked about in part three. And again, it's more, you'll get more open-ended questions. Um, yeah, like I said, they will be related to the topic discussed in part three, but they are sort of big, sort of abstract, big picture ideas. So when we start the exam, a lot of those part one questions are just about you and about things familiar to you. And then sort of as you move through the exam towards the end, it always gets sort of big picture stuff. So so how it works is you have, yourself, there's your partner, and then the examiner as well. And either you or your partner will be asked a question, and then that person should respond. They should give their opinion, and then you should ask your partner as well, and then continue to talk about that question. So you do not have to do this last step. You are not obligated to ask your partner what they think. If you don't, the examiner will simply do it for you. However, it is a lot better to be like proactive. So take the lead. If you're proactive, you're taking the lead, taking the initiative, and ask yourself and try to sort of promote a conversation around the topic. And you just can basically talk about one question until the end of the exam. So you just discuss that question with the other candidate or the other candidates until you either run out of things to say or run out of time. And the examiner also has a number of questions ready in case you need additional questions to help guide your conversation. So you'll get one question, talk about it. When you're ready, they'll ask the other person a question, and it goes like that. Oh yeah, so an open-ended, so we could sort of think about questions in sort of two ways, right? So we have what we call like yes, no questions, right? And so those are questions which can only be responded by, well, not only be responded, but they can be responded by simply saying yes or no. Like, for example, did you eat dinner? That's going to be like a yes or no question, right? Like, yes or no. It's like either you ate or you didn't, right? So very, very simple. But an open-ended question, those are questions typically that begin with like a what or like how or why. They're questions that require an explanation. So require explanation. So for example, if this is a closed sort of question, a yes-no question, an open-ended question might be, what did you have for dinner? Because that would require an explanation, right? So you can't say yes or no to that question. It's gonna be oh, I had chicken, chicken and rice or something. So yeah. So that's what we mean by an open-ended question or open-ended conversation. Yeah. So the final part, yeah, open-ended questions. So questions that require some discussion. So that's what it means. Okay. So I hope that's clearer. Yeah. So they're going to be big questions. So one thing could be, for example, what are some things that people are hopeful about the future? So again, it's not a yes or no, but something that sort of stimulates a conversation, right? So what are some things that people are hopeful about in the future? Yeah, what are some things that people are hopeful about in the future? Or maybe for the future, that would be better. Grammar. For the future. Like, for example, so we talked a little bit about health earlier, maybe medical breakthroughs. So for example, so we talked about new treatments for disease. I mean, that would be fantastic, right? Maybe we will find some cures for diseases that have long been considered, incurable, right? So like cancer, for example, or something like that. That would be fantastic, right? Any other ideas? And that could potentially improve the, our quality of life, right? Or also potentially lead to, a longer life expectancy. Or increased life expectancy, yes, to increased life expectancy. So the life expectancy is sort of how long people typically live for. Any other ideas? All right, so used and dangerous, but let's think positively though, because I knew that a lot of this lesson was going to be doom and gloom. So let's think of something positive. Maybe how could robots be used in a positive way? How might people be hopeful about robots? Maybe maybe with the use of robotics, um, surgeries might become less invasive. So an invasive surgery is one that they have to cut you open and um, is one in which they have to, cut you open and maybe make really big incisions, and they are just, really intense. So, so if they become less invasive, then that means, there are less, they don't have to cut you open as much, or maybe they just go in through like a little hole or something like that. So less invasive surgeries are easier to heal, or maybe potentially less painful, less complications. You say have less complications. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Exactly. Maybe robots and technology will be used for rescuing people in, yeah, exactly, incidents like fire and earthquakes. Yeah, that would be interesting, right? Wouldn't it be interesting also maybe there will be advances in, safety alarms and systems. Like, for example, maybe someday they will be able to predict when earthquakes happen, so that people have a lot of time to prepare or escape. I mean, that would be quite something, right? Um, yeah, that would be really fantastic. Um, yeah, let's talk about technology. Technology. So technological advancements. Maybe AI could be used to help with renewable energy. I don't know. Or technological advances, obviously, with maybe we will see more advances in um, renewable energy, right? That would be like a big thing. We're seeing a lot of that already anyway. Any idea? Other ideas, maybe? Maybe we will find a way to produce food. Um, so maybe we will find a way to produce food. So maybe we find a way. Maybe we will find a way to produce food using processes which are less destructive to the environment. That would be interesting. Maybe we'll grow crops in like skyscrapers or something. That would be really interesting. Destructive. Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting idea. That maybe, yeah, so maybe more, yeah, people will be able to communicate, and there will be, you said language transparency, but like people becoming, yeah, and people be, yeah, encouraged to learn more languages. That's an idea. Or maybe also, maybe there will be, maybe with AI, people will, um, you know, we will see more computers acting as, you know, translators, right? I mean, that would be interesting. Just have everything translate things in real time. That would be kind of fascinating. Or maybe we would all just like exist sort of in an online realm and we could do meetings that way. Yeah, that'd be really interesting. So yeah, so maybe like less barriers of less communication barriers. Aha. We often talk about barriers to communication. Yeah, so less communication barriers because of technology and people learning more languages. Yeah, people are definitely, you know, people definitely have more access to education, right? So there will be a lot more access to communication in the future. So we can learn more languages, right? And be more informed. Yeah, that would be great, right? So yeah, so more governments be like yeah, so they will prioritize their own the good, yeah, the good of their maybe their own countries and the good of their citizens rather than, you know, international, corporations and things like that or organizations. Yeah, that's like a big thing actually. We'll see maybe more like more equity, right? That would be fantastic. Like bigger steps in just with bigger steps with social, progress. Um, yeah, it's really fantastic, right? Like we're already seeing like, more diversity, maybe greater political engagement. That would be really fantastic. And better gender equity, yes. So gender, yes, exactly. Better gender equality in the job and workplace. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really great. Um, yeah, maybe more equal opportunities and access to resources. Yeah, lots of great ideas. And how about, here's a good question. What are some things you think we can do to make life better for future generations? So, what can we do now to make life better for future generations? Yeah, okay, so ideas for overcoming, yeah, so ways to overcome economic depressions, or maybe maybe find a way to share the wealth. That would be something. Maybe a little like finally find better ways to distribute everything. Taking care of the environment, absolutely. Yeah, so taking care of the environment. Yeah, obviously we can't, live without the environment. So it's essential that we preserve it. Also, it's important that we address climate change, right? And reduce our, what we say, carbon footprint. So for example, we could do this by, conserving energy, right? And using public transportation and electric cars, for example. Yeah, it's also, so going back to the environment, also, it's also really important to preserve, like you said, like, so sea creatures, so like marine life and sea creatures, definitely. Um, Maybe also just promoting education, right? I mean, since, education is, critical to passing on knowledge, right? And giving people the skills they need in order to succeed in the future, right? So it's maybe important to find ways to make education accessible and affordable to all, maybe something like that. We could advocate for things. So if you advocate for something, means basically, I don't know if promote is right, but when you sort of promote an idea, or so for example, you might advocate for the rights of people's rights, or in this case, we could advocate for like equitable access, maybe, to quality education. So we could go to, politicians and governments and say that we, the people, want these things. So when we speak up and say that things are really important, we advocate for them. I suppose we could also, you know, donate or volunteer schools, potentially. How about we could invest in sustainable infrastructure, maybe. So that could be something. So whenever, we build something, we can, keep sustainability in mind, right? And become less wasteful, right? So we can preserve the resources that we have, right? Yeah, so lots of different things that we could potentially that we could really do. All right. So I'm gonna wrap up. I just wanted to leave everyone with a couple idioms, maybe, because we all love idioms. Um, so one idiom, maybe we could say that we have a crystal ball to predict the future. So, for example, if we want to say that we can or can't predict the future, we could refer to a crystal ball. So, for example, I'm not a psychic and I cannot tell you how things will turn out. I don't have a crystal ball, right? So it's a bit sarcastic, but we might say something like that. Or, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen at the party, right? So I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you what's going to happen at the party. Right? So you can't predict the future. So we could say that. We could also might say to have something in the pipeline. And this basically refers to when you have a plan or you're developing something and you're planning on releasing that thing in the near future. Like I could say that I have a number of different plans in the pipeline and hopefully I will be rolling out, hopefully I will be doing them shortly. So here the example is I have a new product in the pipeline that I'll be launching next month. So something like that, yeah. Or so I have a few things in the pipeline right now that I'm working on. So a few projects that I'm doing. Another great one is the writing. The writing is on the wall. So we can use that when a situation seems like the outcome is inevitable or unavoidable. And there's a lot of sort of signs that that will be the case. So here, for example, the company has been struggling for months and the writing is on the wall. They will have to close down. So it's inevitable that they will have to close down. So yeah, and usually this is for a negative. So, the writing is on the wall. Unfortunately, I will not get the job. Maybe because I blew the interview, or I blew the interview, or maybe because they hired someone else. Yeah, so that's usually a negative. They said the writing is on the wall. Um, so creating good families or environments and circles to lower crime rates. Yeah, okay. So that's a nice idea. So having a focus on family. Yeah, so I know I didn't really talk about it, but I mean, um, I obviously I was brainstorming ideas for this lesson before this lesson. But yeah, like mental health and just our general well-being, I think could be really important or is really important, right? So yeah, so creating, it's important that we create good families, um, or circles of social circles maybe, where we are connected with others with similar mindsets. And maybe this will lead to, safer communities, lower crime rates. Yeah, okay. Definitely, right? I think also it's just important to, prioritize. We should prioritize, our own health and wellness and maybe be a role model for our children. That could be something. Yeah, I think there's a lot of pushback right now too about like just how, you know, a lot of people have invested so much time and energy into their jobs and they've sacrificed so much, but now everybody's getting laid off and things. So, you know, it's putting ourselves first, I think, is not a bad idea. Yeah. All right. So a couple more idioms, two more. So to be ahead of the curve. So if you're ahead of the curve, you're kind of more advanced or sort of ahead of other people in your field. So, yeah, so the company was ahead of the curve in developing eco-friendly products or, yeah. So if you're sort of on the forefront of a trend, you can be ahead of the curve. And finally, also on the horizon. So if you have a plan, if you expect something to happen, sort of in the near future, usually in the near future, um, but if you expect something to happen, we could say that we have something on the horizon. So we have a new app on the horizon that will make everyone's life a little bit easier. So yeah, or maybe you have some plans on the horizon that you're working on right now, right? Yeah, so some great little idioms. All right. Thanks so much for coming out, everyone. I hope that this has been a little bit helpful. As always, I am going to compile these notes and I will upload everything so you'll be able to access them afterwards. Also, if you missed part one and the first part of this lesson when I talked about part one, part two questions, you can check them out. The video is on YouTube and the notes are there as well, also on Discord. And I will do the same with here these notes as well. And as always, I have lots of ways that you can connect with me and get speaking English with me. We have lots of groups on Telegram, also social accounts on Instagram as well, Facebook. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have like the group for learners. So everybody is welcome to join. I'm hoping to get more group activities going in the future. And I'm thinking about the live lessons for next month. Next month, the topic will be people, all about people. And I'm planning on doing it thinking sort of the focus on sort of psychology and relationships and that sort of thing, because I know I did fashion ages ago. I covered that as a topic. So we're going to talk about people, and that should be a lot of fun. That should be kind of interesting. So be sure to check that out. I might move the time for these lives a little bit earlier, but I do plan on having 2 lives again for part 1 and part 2 and part 3 and part 4 for people next month. So be sure to watch for that. And also about connecting, we also have a Discord as well. I know it's a little quiet in there, but there are places that you can post it, connect with other students. I've set up some chat rooms in there so people can get in there. They can practice their speaking with one another. So feel free to check that out. And of course, I'm also available for lessons, exam prep, sessions of conversation. And like I said, I'm working towards some group activities, so that would be really fantastic because I love when people get to talk. I think it's really fantastic. All right. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have a really fantastic evening or afternoon or morning wherever you are. And I hope to get speaking English with you super soon. Okay? All right. Bye, guys.